So welcome back, Crew Call on the Scooters, season 2, which is crazy that we even had a season 1. But we are with we're trying to be as best friends as we possibly can with this group. This is one half of Grxwn Fxlks, and today we have Masai Turner with us.
Hey,
Swoon is is he in Phoenix? Is that where he is, in Arizona?
you never know where I could be these days.
So I appreciate you being with us today. Your piece "Celebrate" is how I was introduced to you through a mutual friend of ours in May, who was shooting your video, which is such a fun video, and just full of spirit and love and graciousness. So I want to get into that first, but I want to ask you about your name, Grxwn Fxlks, because there are X's where the O's are supposed to be. So I wanted just to go through just like how you guys came up with the name, what's the meaning behind all of that, and then I just want to get into your voice, which I love. Honestly, you have the best. I'm like, first of all, you should be doing every voiceover in the world, but second of all, you have just a beautiful voice to listen to when you're singing and you're rapping. So I wanted to find out the musicality of your family too. So
Sure.
Answer any of that, but let's start with your name.
Yeah, so just starting with Grxwn Fxlks, Akil and I have been making music together for a long time. We've been making music since we were very young. Akil, even before I was making music with him, started while he was in high school. I started while I was in high school. And I think generally speaking, people believe, especially in these days, hip hop and rap music to be a very young man's game. And I can understand that from an industry perspective, from a commercial perspective. There is a definite push in the music industry to ensure that we've got very young, and I would say mostly immature subject matter out there for young people to consume. But the thing about hip hop music and the culture of hip hop is that it's been started in all of our lifetimes. So it's a very young music. So we've never seen a second generation of hip hop culture and a second generation of hip hop artists. And there is an assumption that once you're not a young man and once you're beyond maybe the immature messaging that is more commercially appealing, that you're kind of over the hill and you're done with it and you need to move on and do something else. So when Akil and I decided to kind of embark on a new music project, which is just him as the producer and me as the MC, we didn't want to establish any marketing, any release dates, any logos, any downward pressure being created on us by when we needed to release a project and when we needed to come out. So when we got to the point where people kept saying, well, what is this? We had to come up with something. And the day that we really needed to come up with a name and just start talking about the project, all we kept seeing was little this and baby this and young this and young that and lil this and baby that. And when I was looking at it, these are not babies, these were not lils, and these were not youngs. These are guys that were grown men. These were guys that definitely had some responsibility. Some of them were fathers and parents, and I just found it weird that so many grown men were calling themselves lil and young and baby. And I thought that that was an attempt to appeal to the industry to appear immature or to appear younger, because that's more commercially appealing. If you're seen as someone who's really young, if you're seen as someone who is lil, then you're approved to do immature, maybe ignorant things. But as grown men, we have more of a responsibility, especially from a cultural perspective, to speak more knowledge and truth to the people. And that's always been hip hop's charge, to create a voice for a voiceless culture, for voiceless communities, and speak the truth about what's going on there. So just opposed to all of the presentation of what I thought was artists. I'm definitely not Lil, I'm not Young, and I'm not Baby. So I thought that saying that we were grown would give people a different expectation of what we were going to talk about, and it would create a standard for us that was probably above where the industry is pointing our music commercially.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because you're showing great responsibility for what you're putting out there. I mean, it's like when you talk about that and talk about what the industry might dictate versus what you are responsible for.
Yeah.
That's a shift in thinking. Who influenced your sound in terms of, like, what were you influenced by when you were growing up? What were you listening to? What were you attracted to in terms of music?
Yeah, there's probably too many to name, but I think in the name of just kind of continuing on that same conversation, I grew up on groups like Public Enemy. I grew up on artists like KRS-One that were very skilled in what they did, made great music, were able to appeal on a worldwide level, but always had a standard of providing the culture and the world with messages that matter, right, and created a voice for people that weren't there. There's also timeless music that exists in what they're doing. So if you think about the song Fight the Power from Public Enemy, you put that on right now, right? And it can be the soundtrack to most of what's going on right now. Yeah. KRS-One did two songs that are extremely relevant right now that were created more than 20 years ago. He did Sound of the Police, which is more of a history of how we got to this point of policing, especially in the Black community. And then he did a song called Black Cop, which is about how, believe it or not, you'll find that Black cops, especially in our community, especially when they're amongst their fraternal order, may feel that they need to prove themselves in front of other cops by over-policing even more in their own communities. So imagine those two topics being discussed in the late 80s, early 90s, and being a teenager and becoming aware of that versus other music that may have been very fleeting in the present. Right. So just creating timeless music and a couple of those influences just made me feel like there was a responsibility, if you were going to be behind a microphone and if you were going to be creating art, that the art should, in some ways make people uncomfortable by telling the truth.
And what's your process for that? Like, as you're writing or as you're trying to create something new, do you really dive into that, or do you try to stay away from what's happening? Or can you talk a little bit about how you get there?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I used to just say what was on my mind in the moment. So if I was attached to a certain topic or a theory, I would just start writing something, and whatever came out became that. Recently, with everything that's been going on in the world, I've had more of an energy to write something quickly. But when I recently, more recently, so I got my bachelor's degree a while ago, but in the last, 10 years, I got my master's degree. And I had to do a lot of research, which I hate. So I started taking more of a research approach to writing lyrics, because I want every line to be a conversation. I want every line to be, I want us to be able to have a whole conversation based on every line I write. So recently I wrote a song called Say Their Names, which should be easy to understand what that might be about. And it was more of a research approach. It wasn't so emotional, because I actually stopped myself from writing the song for a couple of months because I didn't want it to just be what was on the surface. And I wanted to have some retrospect as well as introspect before I, really started to write it. So my process typically is to really internalize a concept or an emotion and sit with it for a while, sometimes almost uncomfortably, and not write anything, but just really get a full perspective and a real understanding of the range of emotions and opinions that can happen within that particular topic or idea, and then kind of sit down and write. Once I have the first line, it doesn't take me much time to write because I got all of these ideas and topics and research kind of baked into my memory. So it becomes pretty easy to write after that.
And is that I mean, I read the article in Forbes that was September 3rd. If anybody hasn't read it yet, it's a great article by Shane Snow, I think.
Yeah, Shane, that's my guy.
So let me ask, because the title of Why True Leadership is about sharing strong perspectives over best practices. So that's part of that, because Celebrate, you haven't released Say Their Names yet. Am I correct about that? When does it drop?
Yeah, so we're gonna release it right before the election. My goal is to just have a few more conversations and to make people really consider where they're going with their voice and their power that they do have to vote. I would say the majority of my fans are already decided on which direction that they're going, but I do hear a lot of conversations that are nitpicking what the two choices might be. And I think that this is a tactic used to make people who are less likely to vote not vote, by bringing out little things that would stop someone from supporting a particular candidate versus talking about the big rocks and large things that are going to separate and maybe destroy even more what we already have. So we're going to put this song out a couple of weeks before the election, somewhere around 10/20, where the entire EP will come out, which will be a list of about 5 or 6 songs that we'll be releasing.
Okay. Wow. And you grew up in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Yep. Born and raised.
And where did you go to high school?
Yeah. So I went to Taylor Alderdice High School.
Okay. And let me ask this. Were you always into music? I mean, you were listening to music, Chuck D on your playlist, I think about that, but I mean, were you in a band? Were you practicing stuff? Were you rapping with friends? I mean, what was happening while you were growing up?
Yeah. So in high school, I really music was very prevalent, just as a part of, I'm assuming it's that way for all high schoolers. But there was when I was in high school, there was the East Coast West Coast beef, and you had to kind of be on one side or the other side of that, right? So you were either on the West Coast or the East Coast side, and I think although I was aware that was just an industry ploy to get people, any competition, whether it's in sports or politics, any competition is going to get people more involved and engaged in a particular subject or artist. So the East Coast, West Coast beef, although it was generated in the music industry and the artists really didn't have problems for the most part, I was really an East Coast guy. So I was really attached to a lot of the artists that were coming from the East Coast at that time. But a lot of people in my high school and friends of mine were like really big on West Coast artists. I mean, The Chronic was out at that time, which was an undeniable record. Doggy Style then came out later after that, another undeniable record. But there was a lot of artists from the East Coast that I was really attached to, that I found had a lot of opinions that were the same as mine and style that was the same as mine. I named Dr. Dre and Snoop, but on the other side of that was De La Soul and A Tribe Called Quest and just, all these other artists that were out. And I just found that the things that I was into, the things that I was reading, the things that I was wearing, the things that I was talking about were more likely to be discussed in some of the East Coast records that I was listening to. So I was really into just lyrics. And at the time, the artists that I was really into, I used to write down all of their lyrics and make sure I understood everything that they were saying, because I like to recite their lyrics. In 9th grade, 10th grade, I really like to recite their lyrics, but I wanted to know what I was talking about. So I would write things down and figure out what people were saying.
Where does that come? Where does that curiosity come from? Was where did that come from? Because I mean,
Yeah.
innate kind of, I'm gonna really understand rather than thinking something ridiculous and have absolute no idea.
Yeah, so I think it comes from my parents.
Okay.
My father was a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, which is how my family got to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I was a first generation Pittsburgher.
What subject was he, or what did he do?
So he started the what they called then the Black Studies Department. It eventually became the Africana Studies Department.
Okay.
And then my mother was my mom was a musician and a vocalist. So my father used to take me to class with him when I was very young, and I used to hear him talking about things and using words that I didn't understand and talking about subjects that I didn't understand. So that made me really want to understand the words, because I learned that they have power and I learned that people got passionate about them. So I think I got attached to words through my father just by listening to him talk. And then my mom, I think I just had more of a natural gene-based connection to music, because I could really just pick up on tunes in a way that most of my friends couldn't. So I think the combination of my father being a professor and an academic and my mother being an artist really was like a 50-50 thing with me. So both of those things really are attached to me, with words and music and kind of putting those things together. I later found that my middle name was Orpheus, which is the god of poetry and music. So I think it was like meant to be almost.
Mine's Lynn, which means so.
I guess what my middle name is
Parents,
also.
they did. That's amazing. And so
Yeah.
too. I mean, I think they gave up on our middle name. So you.
Do you remember the first song or piece that you wrote? Like, do you remember that, the name of that, or how you got to that?
The first song that I wrote.
How old were you?
I think the first song that I wrote in like 10th grade was called "The Flavor You Favor." I think that's what it was called. If I dug deep into my garage, I might be able to find a notebook with that on it. But most of my early days were just about bragging about how cool you were and not having a lot of subject matter. I think when I got towards the middle of my development, I started to talk more about things that I had seen become issues for other people, but I was able to avoid. Almost like a survivor's guilt approach to lyrics. And then in this time, I think what's most important is just speaking your truth. If you just tell what's on your mind, how you're feeling, what's going on, that's going to have a unique appeal, because the interesting thing about people is we're all different. As many similarities we have as many differences we have. And if you can talk about your perspective through your lens in a very honest and authentic way, that's going to have appeal to people, because no one's ever going to hear anything like that again. The more you try to monitor what's going on with other people and their perspectives and make yours fit into that mold, the less likely it's going to appeal to people when they have so many choices. So outside of taking a traditional commercial approach, which is looking what's selling, looking what people are playing on the radio and trying to mimic that, which I'm definitely not going to do. I think just being yourself, being authentic, giving your true opinion, and not being fearful with being vulnerable in those discussions, in those moments where you're being artistic, is going to make your work last for sure.
Let's jump into when you started Grxwn Fxlks. And the question is this your full-time, because you have a master's degree, and what's your degree at? Like, you got to give us some of that, because there are kids that watch this, and I think as a young musician, as somebody in the arts community that has a voice and wants to use it, and especially in a very special way, especially because you have like gorgeous voice, but it's, how do you kind of get into that moment, and then why continue education? It's like,
Yeah.
balancing that.
Yeah. So I've been in a position when I was young where I had a record deal, and I was working with a record label and a distributor, and there was a lot of um, opinion, direction, pressure, money,
Mm-hmm.
schedule, agenda, reports, all of these things that just kind of became a distraction to the reason why I really wanted to create music. So I stepped away from the music industry for quite some time at
That must
that
have
point.
been hard.
What'd you say?
It must have been hard to leave something that you love, but doing it because you're like, I don't want to do what you want me to do.
Yeah, it was more it was more about just not having to worry about I don't think any artist starts making music because they want to worry about hitting some quarterly financial goal, right? Or recouping your advance and expenses. Nobody starts with that in mind. That's never what drives people. Like, oh, I can't wait to be in an office and talk about how much money we recouped, right? No, nobody's thinking that, right? So, how much of the music industry steals your idealistic thoughts on art, right, and creativity? So it wasn't as hard because I believe that my approach to creating music in the music industry can pretty much be applied anywhere, right? You're strategic, you work hard, you focus on your talents and your gifts, and you get into something that you would do for free, right? So and get paid for doing for something you'll do for free, right? So if you kind of apply that to anything, you'll have the energy, you'll have the longevity to be successful in almost anything.
Right.
But yeah, so my degree is in my bachelor degree is in psychology, and my master's degree is in business. So I have an MBA, and that obviously just allowed me other opportunities. I work in the education technology space, mostly focusing on creating platforms for people to take a non-traditional approach to education, whether that is in K through 12 or in college. And right now, obviously, I'm assuming you all know that business is booming.
Yeah.
Because the way that we are right now with the pandemic, we've got to figure out non-traditional approaches. And for the first time, traditional colleges and universities really have to look into other platforms than their Ivy covered buildings and having professors in classrooms talking at people, right? And the ones that are not fighting this and understand that the world lives through glass and through screens and can still be effective, although it's not preferred, are ahead. So that's the business I'm in. And it's very challenging and rewarding, both from a career perspective, but from a financial perspective as well. So because of that, that allows me to invest into my passion. And my passion also happens to have a business and income stream that comes along with it. But the exciting thing about this is we're not dependent on one red penny to come from music. So imagine if an artist didn't have to worry about whether or not their record sold, right?
Yeah.
And what if you only had to worry about, is this music going to have an impact on the people that it lands on? And that's really our mission, right? When people listen to the music, are they inspired to do something? Are they having conversations about what they just listened to? Does it move them emotionally, or does it make them consider something that they never considered before? Right? And if you kind of enter into that, it's very hard to lose, regardless of how many plays, regardless of how many views, and regardless of how many streams you have. Really what we're creating is a catalog of conversation pieces that might be in a museum somewhere more than they would appear on like, an award show. And because there's no pressure to produce income from it, we don't really have to make any choices based on how much money we think it will make. And I think it's very liberating and allows us to operate in an independent way that I think down the road, downstream, is going to give us much more of a commodity in the future, when there's so much surfacey content out there to consume one time and then never really think about it again. I think this is kind of working the opposite way.
Well, I would agree with you. I mean, there's so much music happening in Pittsburgh. I mean,
Yeah.
just so much. And we're kind of in and out of a lot of these different communities. We've had just got to interview Gallo, who's, precious gem, sweet spirit like you. And I think when we talk about collaborations, we were having this conversation the other day. Are you feeling that there will be collaborations coming up in the future? I heard somebody else saying that, like, we're the great collaborations of the 80s. And I don't know if I would say great on any of that, but when you kind of bridge out and look at the scape, is there anybody that you'd want to collaborate with, or do you work with?
Are we talking about in Pittsburgh?
Or anywhere?
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of collaborations coming up. You guys will see this week, we're gonna release a song, a self-titled song called Grxwn Fxlks, and it features DJ Jazzy Jeff. So he's on our single. I'll send you guys the link for that after this conversation.
Love that.
Please do.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I'd say there's a host of collaborations that we either have in the works or are coming down the line. Yes, all of that. I'd love to combine energies when it makes sense. What I don't want to do is force collaborations or collaborate with everyone in the world right now. That's not really my goal. But when it makes sense and when I think the energies are aligned, that'll happen. And we've got the great thing about this independent approach is I can do what I want, right? So it allows us the opportunity to just find the energies that match up and work together on that.
Do you feel that there's a momentum? I mean, getting the Forbes article, getting more press, kind of pushing that, is that helping kind of propel, or does it matter? It doesn't matter if anybody's saying anything, or you're just feeling more responsibility? That was another question I had, was in light of all the hurt that is happening. I think that's really the only way to, and hate, I would say as well. The responsibility, what does that, do you feel that? I mean, it's such a...
Yeah. So that's a great question. Not as much. I don't feel a responsibility as much because I always have touched on these issues. My music has never been absent of these issues, right? I grew up with these issues. I appreciate that the world is becoming more aware of these things going on through the access to technology. I mean, imagine if people would have had cameras on their phones in the 80s or the 90s or 2000s, right? But the fact that the technology has met with the circumstance is bringing things to the surface, but they've always been there. So I think any responsible hip hop artist was already discussing these issues in their way. What is different now is the platform that I have available and how it's growing. In the past, we used to have to hand out flyers or do a show and make sure that people were at a venue to make a point. So we put a lot of effort into making sure that our venues were packed and our shows were sold out so that we could say some of these things to a big crowd. But now, I mean, not that it's any large amount of people, but we have 12,000 people on just one of our platforms, just Instagram alone, right? So 12,000 people fills an arena, right? So if I can make a message and say that, then those 12,000 people could be a sold out arena. Right. So you got to start to think about what is it that you're accomplishing with your platform aside from just numbers that say you're popular, right? And really what that does is it just expands your voice. When I look at our top 5 cities, it's not Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Columbus, and I don't know, Cincinnati and Dayton. It's London, New York, Johannesburg, Paris, and Los Angeles, right? So when I think about that, this is a worldwide platform that we'll be able to use, and those people share our stories. Those people repost what we're posting. Those people tag their friends in our comments, and it's just this multiple that really you have to be more responsible with your platform, to me, than anything else.
Yeah.
My message is always included these social messages. And I think the wrong thing to do is start telling artists what they should be talking about and how they should be talking about it. That should not come from anyone else but the artists and their own creative spirit. But how we use our platforms, there needs to be more of a responsibility. And all of that doesn't need to be driven by corporations like the NBA or the NFL. We all have our own platforms now that we can use. And if you have 50 people, great, use it. If you got 50 million people, great, use it. If you got 12,000 people, great, use it. So that's where I feel the responsibility.
Yeah.
I've been more thoughtful about how I want to use my platform.
We're very intentional with having people to engage and respond.
Yeah.
As well. What do you? I mean, you're doing this. What do you want people to know you by? What do you want them to go? Wow, Masai. He's, this. What do you want them to know you for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of much more talented people than me that quit making art because their initial dream or vision of it was that they were going to become rich or famous. And I always struggle with rich and famous. Those were never really any goals of mine. My goal was more around respect. So what I would want to be known for is someone who doesn't quit. Someone who wasn't the most talented musician or the most talented lyricist, because I think those things are subjective. But what's not subjective is that you continue to invest into your beliefs and your passions. And those are the things that I would want people to know about. It's not to shame anyone who found a different direction or took their career or their passion in a different direction, but I would like for people who still feel the energy and are still driven by creative energy and culture to know that there's not a limitation on when you should stop making art. And somehow in hip hop culture, there is a real push to maybe shame people who are beyond a youthful and mature message to stop making it. But that doesn't happen with the Rolling Stones or Paul McCartney or any of these other artists that we celebrate for continuing to make music. So I think that it would be just to be known as someone who continue to invest in something that they believe in and they're passionate about.
It's so you have Say the Names coming out.
Yeah.
And what else is good? If people need to find you, how can they link up? How do they get to Grxwn Fxlks?
Yeah. So the good thing about our name is if you can spell it, you'll find us, right? So we're the only group with that name on it. I think there's a television show that's called Grxwn Fxlks or something that uses O's, and there's a few mixtapes out there that uses O's, but nobody spells Grxwn Fxlks. So if you can figure that part out, then you'll find us, right? So we're obviously on all social media platforms, and we're the first thing that's going to pop up on any digital streaming platforms that come up. Eventually, so YouTube, any of that type of stuff, you'll find us. So I think that's the easiest way. You type in a Google search will be the first thing that comes up, and then you can kind of go down the rabbit hole there. Something that we're doing to make sure people find us, and you asked a question about responsibility. We're definitely starting to appear in a lot of articles and national publications and things like that. So I think that'll just help spread the word and just give people a different perspective. So that's what's going on with us.
That's wonderful. And when the stages open up, you know, early next year, mid to next
Yeah.
year, will you be going on tour, do you think? Will that be a part?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so strange. It's so strange, right? Because that was really one of the big appeals to doing this again, was to get out and really, you know, have these conversations with actual people and play the music. And yeah, we've had, you know, several conversations in multiple countries and continents about coming out to play music as soon as it's safe. But I'm also thankful for the opportunity not to take the traditional path, because it would have just been very easy to just say, okay, we're hitting the road, let's go see the people, you know. So now I think we're becoming a little bit more sophisticated and savvy with a lot of the things that are available to us digitally, which I think is going to help just expand the message more and help us reach a different group of people. To be honest, we would have hit Philly and New York and DC and Atlanta and Houston and LA and San Francisco. Then we would have came home and we were like, oh, job done. But now there's people reaching out to us that, you know, from South America, there's people reaching out to us from Tokyo, there's people reaching out to us to places that we had no intention on visiting. And we're starting to cultivate some of those relationships and understand what the appeal of the group is worldwide. And that's exciting too. So I think that this having to sit still and really engage people all over the world that have access to your music and your platform is expanding our vision on what this can be once things, you know, come back to normal.
I love that you said it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really is. I think when people really stop, they get to see and listen to what really is happening. So I think that's a part of shining that light on that. So
yeah.
You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us today. I know we said it would be like 20 minutes, but it's been 43 minutes.
Oh, no, it's great. We can keep going. What do you guys got going on today? Let's stop and get some breakfast and then continue.
Yes.
Well, we hope to see you when things open back up, and, you know, just blessings to you and your family, and keep, you know, rapping and sing. I mean, your voice is just so beautiful, and we just appreciate you so much. Thank you for being with us today. We really do thank you for that.
Oh, thank you guys. We got to have this conversation again soon.
It would be amazing. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, Masai.
All right. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you.